Greetings. Dr. Mark Winton here from the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Central Florida, and I'd like to welcome you to the course CCJ 3604, Mental Illness, Crime, and Criminal Justice. This is a relatively new course for the Department of Criminal Justice, and it was rolled out the spring semester 2022. And this course was developed in conjunction with the undergraduate committee and a team of professors based on students' requests and students basically wanting a course on mental disorders and crime and criminal justice. We have a graduate course that we've been running for a number of years now, but as I mentioned, we recently have added this course. So welcome to the course, and hopefully you'll be able to obtain a lot of information that you can use in your studies and in the field and in your educational and professional pursuits. So I'd like to just get right into a few things and asking you, what is a mental disorder? When you think about mental disorder, what do you think about? Is it a deviation from the cultural norms? Is it a medical condition, a thought, behavioral, feeling-based disorder, or a combination of those factors? So it's kind of complex. What is included, what is excluded as mental disorders? For example, is caffeine dependence in there? What about nicotine dependence? What about gambling addiction or sex addiction? And when mental health professionals diagnose people with mental disorders, they use a very detailed book, a manual called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it's in the 5th edition now. We'll just call it DSM-5, and it's published in 2013 by the American Psychiatric Association. It's very interesting to think about the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, because we're in the 5th edition. There's actually been more than 5 editions, but nevertheless, I have a DSM collection. I'm a DSM collector, somewhat. What I'm going to show you, though, is just briefly the first one I have on PDF format somewhere in my computer. I couldn't find it. I was going to print out the first page, but I couldn't find it. But I do have the DSM 2, the 2nd edition, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. There it is. Not very thick, not very long. The next series of DSMs I'm going to show you are actually the diagnostic criteria. So they're pocket guidebooks that have the diagnostic criteria. If you want all the details, you would go to the DSM 5, and you can go to the University of Central Florida library online, in fact, and look at the DSM online. So that's a real nice feature, because it's huge, it's heavy, and it's expensive. So I'm very thankful that our university has that online. Anyway, here's the DSM-3, diagnostic criteria. This really, to me, it has sentimental value. So, well, first of all, it collects DSMs. Okay, but he has one that has sentimental value. Why? Well, this is the one that I actually used in my master's program when I was studying counseling back in the 80s. And I got a master's degree in counseling from Rollins College back in the 80s, and this is what I started with, DSM-3. Feeling a little bit of aging here, because we now we have gone through a bunch. Here is DSM-3R, a revised edition, and then DSM-4, and then DSM-4 TR, text revision, I don't know why I got this one with these metal rings, and doesn't really work too well in your pocket. And then DSM-5, the current one. And again, this is not the actual manual, this is just the diagnostic criteria. So it just gives you the criteria. These are very helpful to use in research and referencing, and you know, especially if you're traveling around to clinics, you know, and of course now you have it on your iPad and apps and all that. But nevertheless, it's important to realize that that's the manual that's used in the United States to diagnose, assess mental disorders. Your textbook talks about the international classifications and so forth, and you can have access to that online as well. The DSM covers a lot: neurodevelopmental disorders, schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders, bipolar and related disorders, depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, trauma and stressor-related disorders, dissociative disorders, somatic-based disorders, eating disorders, elimination disorders, sleeping disorders, sexual dysfunctions, gender dysphoria, disruptive impulse control and conduct disorders, substance-related and addictive disorders, neurocognitive disorders, personality disorders, paraphilic disorders, and there's some others there as well. So it's quite extensive. Interestingly enough, the DSM-1 had 106 disorders, and then in the second edition it jumped up to 182, and the third 265, and when we get into the more recent ones, over 300 disorders. And the psychiatrists get together and conduct research studies and look at other professionals as well who have input, and they decide what to include and what to exclude and what to change as they make these revisions and as we gain more scientific knowledge. But Kirk and Cutchins back in 1992 in their book talked about some different purposes of the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. For example, regulating client flow, protecting clients from harm, acquiring financial resources, funding, for example, rationalizing decision making, and also advancing political agenda. So there's certainly, we would say, there's politics that can be involved in creating, making, or removing disorders. There's also a lot of theories of mental disorders, and I'm not going to go over those in detail right now, but when you think about it, they range from genetic and biochemical to family systems to sociological and anthropological based. A lot of different theories out there. I have a PowerPoint that goes along with this presentation, and give you some definitions of incidence and prevalence, and also I do a very brief presentation of the 1994 National Comorbidity Study, which really gave us a good estimate of the extent of mental disorders, some of the mental disorders, I should say, the more common ones in the United States. And there's been some research that's published since, and that's reflected in your textbook as well. But a couple things from that study which I thought were really relevant, besides looking at the numbers, for example, that a majority of the respondents were comorbid for lifetime disorders, which basically comorbidity means that there's more than one disorder. And that also pointed out that there are some differences based on demographic factors like age and gender and socioeconomic status, and whether a person lived in urban, suburban, or rural areas and region. And so I have a summary table that shows you the lifetime, meaning they had the disorder at some point in their life, and also the 12-month in the previous year. The percentages that indicated that they had the symptoms of that disorder. And I have on their depression, alcohol dependence, social phobia, substance abuse disorders, anxiety, APD, which is antisocial personality disorder, and NAP, non-affective psychosis disorders, and then the total. One of the remarkable findings, I think, is that that study found that over the lifetime, 48% had some type of mental disorder, and a 12-month kind of snapshot, yearly, was 29%. So that's relatively high. 1 out of 3 people have some type of mental disorder based on this study. Of course, there's been criticisms of the study. I'm not going to get into all that. The antisocial personality disorder, I thought was interesting because I started looking at demographics from the study, and that becomes relevant as well especially when you're working in the criminal justice system. So that's one of the disorders that would actually be related to risk for criminal activities. Probably what's real important to point out is that there's a lot of myths regarding mental disorders, and probably one of the big ones we should get out of the way right away is that mental disorders are a good predictor for violence. They're not. And we'll see that as we progress in the semester, that there are certain conditions or situations that increase the risk for violence or criminal behavior, perhaps, but overall, mental disorders are not these useful predictors of crime and violence. But we see that we see a large number of those with mental disorders end up in the criminal justice system, and so it's very important for us to understand that. But I certainly realize that there's a great deal of negative imagery in the media, and we want to avoid that, and point out that, and even, for example, if I'm dealing with a case and I'm presenting it and I talk about that person's mental disorders, what's real important to always realize is that that's just one case, and those were factors among a whole bunch of other factors, but it's the majority of people with mental disorders are not engaging in crime or violent behavior, and so that's real important to recognize. And throughout the course, though, we'll see when the focus on particular mental disorders and cases is relevant, and so I think that is something we'll see throughout the course there. I did want to mention that my background real briefly. I've been teaching at UCF for over 30 years. Prior to going into teaching, I worked as a counselor, and so I have a number of years of experience working as a counselor in the forensic mental health field. And I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from UCF, a master's degree I mentioned in counseling from Honors College, and also have a master's degree in applied sociology from University of Central Florida. And then I finished up my education obtaining a PhD from University of Connecticut, in Storrs, Connecticut, in sociology. And I'm also a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, national board certified counselor, and also a clinically certified forensic counselor. And I have not practiced in a number of years, so I'm not actively practicing as a mental health professional, but I did practice for quite some time in the 80s and the 90s. So when I talk about cases, that will kind of give you a reference point that we have, that I did work in the field, and I still do a lot of research that focuses on mental disorders. Most of my research now focuses on genocide and terrorism and trauma and violent behavior. So that's kind of my area now, and so if I talk about that, you kind of know why. All right, let me wrap up here. I don't. Wow, 15 minutes. That's not too bad for a video. You'll find all the materials on our web course, and so you want to make sure that you read the entire syllabus. I have a copy right here, and it's 8 pages long. The schedule is on the back, page 8. My wife sent me an email the other day about a professor who locked $50 in a locker with and then put at the end of the syllabus where the locker was, the combination, and if you get to that first, you get that prize. And at the end of the semester, he had like 70 students, I believe. At the end of the semester, he went to the locker and the $50 was still there, and the lock, he said at a particular number, it was still there. So I don't have any prize. There's I would just recommend reading the syllabus, but I like to use that example. That's kind of a neat story, and creative way of showing the relevance or importance. What you want to know really from the syllabus is the grading scale on page 2, the evaluation procedures. You can see there's 3 exams and also 3 debate halls, which will be posted on the home page. A lot of information you can read through there. And then the last page is real important, because that's not only our schedule, but it also will tell you when the exams are open, the time frame of when they're open, and also when you would need to post those debate halls by certain dates. So that's real important there. It's in the 3rd column. And again, I'm sorry, no prize if you read the whole syllabus. Of course, that's even more difficult if you're online. If I had it in a locker somewhere, let's say on campus, and you're in California, that's not really fair, is it? So anyway, kind of interesting. Well, again, welcome to the course, and I wish you all the best and a good semester. Thank you.